Good evening. We're at the August 13th meeting of the Milford Planning Board.
13th.
Did I say 13th?
Yeah, you said 15th.
All right. We're having a joint meeting with the Ad hoc Comprehensive Plan Committee.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having us again. Josh Fiala with the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. Happy to be with you. Happy to see you. I'm not sure if a couple of us have met, so good to meet you guys. And happy to be working with you all. I'm joined by Courtney Lewis, my colleague, who will be talking us through land use in this presentation as well. I understand we're the only agenda item this evening, but we'll try not to hold you here too long. But we do have a fair amount to talk through. So we've been making some very good progress. Over these summer months, we have the existing conditions brief to not talk through entirely, but just kind of introduce to you what it is and refer you to it to take a further look at.
Sure.
We did want to go through some of the community feedback and discuss that with you that we received from the community survey, which was great response from the community. And then talk through the initial draft vision statement that we have started, but that part of this process is really focused on that draft vision statement, so it's a start, but we fully anticipate this being a working draft as the process continues and hope that we'll be making it better throughout. And then we'll focus, as we have done in previous discussions, on a single topic this evening, that one being land use. And as we go through our meetings together over the course of the coming months, we'll get through all the different topics of the comprehensive plan. And then wanted to end on talking about the fall and the community engagement approach and how we're going to pivot in many ways. We're at a sort of transition point from what we have been doing to shifting more towards a focus on draft goals, which will be what the engagement in the fall is focused on. So thank you, Ad hoc Committee and Planning Board members, for being a part of this process and supporting it. It's important for the town to be looking proactively about the future. And this comprehensive plan looks out over the next 10 years or so, is the approach. Here's the simplified timeline for the comp plan. In the spring, we've been focusing on getting the plan process socialized in the community, trying to build some awareness about it, and then also focusing on building up some existing conditions, understanding both from the community's perspective, also from the data and research perspective, and then doing some visioning exercises both in the survey, but then also in a forum which we hosted, and then having a series of small group discussions that we've been hosting throughout the community as well. So we're at that kind of knuckle between the fall and spring. As we shift and pivot towards the fall, we're really building on the foundation which we've now established. We'll kind of go through that foundation with you this evening. But as I mentioned, the focus as we shift towards the fall will be beginning to put together initial draft goals in each of the topics and then starting to gather feedback and build those up as a set of information with the community feedback, and really trying to take a very deliberate approach to getting the community involved in helping us craft those goals over the fall. So the existing conditions brief, which looks like you have very nice feedback in front of you, so thank you, Larry, for putting all that together for members. This document is really, I would say, also a work in progress, but is a very good snapshot of a lot of the work we've been doing to date. For each of the topics, all the topics of the comp plan are included in this existing conditions brief. It really provides a foundation for shifting to those goals and gives us the opportunity to share with you all the work that has been happening by our different topic leads in terms of data and analysis that has been collected, the beginning of some reflections on that data and observations that our staff are starting to make across our team. And we invite you to take a look through it, alert us to anything that you see that doesn't seem right, or questionable information or data. That's always helpful for us to ground truth that, of course. But we think it's a very good start and solid information. It's pretty extensive. When we compiled the 8 topics together like this, I think it's in the neighborhood of 120 pages or so. But I can switch to, let me just share this real quick, the document itself, just to walk through what this looks like as well. So this is what you have in your packets. So it includes a brief introduction, which is the same introduction which we shared at the town meeting. So that's familiar to you. It's the same narrative. Just to anyone that didn't catch that before gets a feel for what a comp plan is and what this process is all about. But then the focus of this document really is the topics of the plan. So that's from land use in downtown to economic development, housing, transportation, cultural and historic resources, natural environment and open space, and then ending on community services and facilities. And each of the topics are arranged in a similar fashion, and I'll just show you down to one of them here. So each topic has a brief introduction, which just kind of lays out what the topic is about, goes through some key findings, some either relevant bullet points or statistics from the topic, and then goes through existing conditions with maps, figures, and data for each of the different topics, and then ends with a brief discussion around opportunities we see in that topic, both things from the analysis of the data, but also things that we're hearing from the community and the feedback and the discussion that we're having at large, and then also a discussion around challenges in each of the topics as well. So I think challenges and issues precede, and then opportunities is what each of the topics end on. So this, as I mentioned, is we just share with you. We will be continuing to build on this in a lot of ways. As goals get established, we'll be revisiting this data. Maybe there's a sort of data which will be helpful for us to expand on as the goals come into clear view, or another data which might not even show up in this existing conditions document so far that we'll chase down and find as needed as this process continues. As we move more toward a plan document in the spring 2025, these, I would say not all of this information, but some of it strategically get pulled forward into the comp plan document itself, and we'll be trying to do that in such a way that it's really the information that makes the most sense to support the goals that have been surfaced through this process. So I think this is a good start, good information for us to build on, and will be a lot of this information, but not all of it will show up again in the final plan as this continues to develop. So again, please do take your time. There's no, feedback even a month or two from now is useful, so this will continue to be a live document and a work in progress. So don't feel like you have to rush through this, but at your leisure, please do send us a note if you see something or have a question or consideration. Any thoughts or questions about that document?
This is like a generic question. There's specifics behind it, but the generic question is, how do you think about, or how do we think about how the sections join? And I'll give an example. So the one example that comes to mind for me is, land use, which I think we're going to talk about tonight. The document's pretty incredible. You go through, there's a ton of material on land use, but then in another section it talks about wellhead protection areas. And I think those could be joined. You wouldn't want to zone something industrial that's also in the wellhead protection area, right? So how do those things combine across the dimensions?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and it's really the power of this type of planning process. That's the comprehensive nature of it, is looking at those synergies between the different topic areas. So we're accomplishing that in a few ways. I think it's important for us to present the data sort of in their silos in this document, just to kind of get it all organized. But then internally, our team is actually coming together through a series of work sessions where we all compare notes, compare observations, and kind of compare findings across those topics to identify some of those things, like how does open space land use and economic development relate as a triad? How does land use and transportation relate, as those are inextricably linked as well? And then in any number of ways that the topics overlap and have synergy between them. We will also, as the goals for each topic begin to emerge, there will be overlap between those goals as well. And I think that's where we'll be doing that cross-pollination and looking at between the two. There will also potentially, in some cases, be goals in certain topics that are in opposition to goals in other topics. And so then we'll be going through a process of identifying that and trying to see how that can be reconciled through this process as well. So I
appreciate, that's a great answer. I appreciate that. Just for timeline on that? Like, so is that something that will be going on for the next year, basically, and then it culminates with the prioritization?
Yeah, I would say the goals are really the focus of the fall. As the goals come into view towards the end of the fall, say Thanksgiving time, between Thanksgiving and Christmas, I think that sort of more holistic view across topics will become more clear, and where those focus areas that need to be that are sort of cross-topic, cross-cutting in nature. Oftentimes what emerges is a set of goals that aren't necessarily nested in only one topic, but cross several. And so we'll see those, some of them will sort of naturally prioritize themselves because we're seeing, everyone's talking about, we've already seen traffic and congestion as sort of one of those topics that is nested in transportation, but it's impacted by a lot of the other topics as well. So I think that will be one, goals and how to address congestion and traffic will be one of those cross-cutting areas, I would imagine, that start to get developed, but there will be others.
Thanks.
So you can see just in the bullet points, so this is, again, a compilation of all the data. I would say that the challenges and opportunities that begin to outline do start to signal where some of the thinking in terms of how these goals might emerge. So that's a good place to look as well. We flipped through the document just to give you a feel for its construction. And next we can shift to community feedback and the community survey specifically. There's a lot of feedback that has occurred. The feedback we're going through in this set of slides is focused on the survey. We're going through a process right now of a bit of a meta-analysis of all of the feedback we received. So in small group discussions from department heads, from you all in our previous meetings, meeting with community-based organizations. We had a group of those together back in June. And this community survey itself. So putting all of that together and seeing where those larger patterns of feedback occur. In this case, we're focused on the survey. It was open from mid-May through just about, just last week. We closed it officially. We ended up hitting 600 responses right on the nose, which is great. I think a really good level of response and a good level of knowledge and understanding about this process, sort of an awareness of this process that we can build on as we move forward. We've also collected a fair amount of emails. People have voluntarily given us their emails, so we can now build on that to give direct updates to the audience, which is interested in this, and the community as well. The survey itself was promoted through a variety of resources and sort of community channels, so the schools, youth center, senior center, both through some local news as well, and then the water department helped us push it out also. So we appreciate all of that help in getting the word out. I'll just flip through these briefly, kind of touching on the most frequent responses, but you can see challenges facing Milford, asking people to identify the top 3. The priorities which rose to the top, as I mentioned, are reducing traffic congestion. That shows up in a lot of these. Improving the downtown has been a focus for our discussions at the ad hoc committee, and that shows up in the community as well. Municipal budget and taxes, and then affordability of housing. You see some of the other priorities in that list as well. And people seeing a lot of opportunity for investment and growth in the downtown, but also along I-495. Transportation challenges, again, keying in on traffic congestion, but also road conditions and maintenance, strengthening traffic control and enforcement, and then looking at improving and strengthening the sidewalk network around town as well. In land use, protecting the natural environment, but also supporting small businesses and attracting investment in the downtown. And in economic development, a focus on restaurants, both in the downtown and outside of downtown, small retail shops and services and support for those small businesses that make those services happen, and healthcare, which is a major cluster and job center in the town, makes the town a regional center. It's interesting, we asked what percentage of shopping people do at Milford businesses, either online or in person. and 37% do about 26 to 50% of their shopping locally, so potentially some room for growth to capture more dollars locally, but that's also not a bad foundation for that local spending as well. That is interesting to compare to the 2003 comp plan survey, which asked a similar question, and it looked like there was a lot more in the 76 to 100% range at that time, so 35% identified that pretty deep local spending, and that's down to 7% in this survey. These are, of course, kind of difficult to pinpoint exactly, but this is how people reflect on it. Housing issues, overcrowding we heard both in our interviews, but then also shows up in this survey, and making sure that people have safe housing conditions, property tax relief, and thinking about the cost of home ownership and housing specifically, and the increase of housing costs in general, which is difficult locally. Of course, Milford is a part of a larger real estate market, but I think there's strategies that Milford can be a part of to improve housing affordability. Community facilities and services, continuing to invest in infrastructure in the town and continuing to invest in the schools is number 2, and then maintaining the current assets through the buildings and facilities that the town owns. And then increasing ADA accessibility of parks in terms of open space and recreation, need for more recreational programs and more town parks, potentially some smaller neighborhood parks in areas where access and equity to access is less so, and that discussion is found in the open space chapter of the existing conditions document. And environmental concerns. People are concerned about ground and surface water quality and preventing pollution of those sources, protecting water sources from development, and preserving wildlife and habitat in the town. Encouraging preservation in general in terms of history, arts, and culture efforts, providing more support for the arts locally, and then improving strategies of support in terms of getting more local artists involved in a variety of ways in the town and in its public space. And then a few more questions that build up to the visioning efforts that were put together through the draft vision statement. What originally attracted you to live in Milford? So sort of maybe a little bit more affordability in the past than we're seeing in the present era, where people defined it as housing in their price range. That's what was available in Milford. And proximity to family and friends, and proximity to employment. And then also welcoming small town feel and low tax rate in the neighborhoods kind of inch up towards the top of this list as well. The greatest assets of Milford, its location and regional center between Boston and Worcester, and its parks and open space network and those assets, the homes and neighborhoods as well, and the town services and facilities are all seen as great assets and strengths. And then it was interesting thinking about, again, what words people would prefer to use to describe Milford today. And most people are gravitating towards the medium size or large town. And that, I think, is a difference from what was used in the 2003 comp plan survey, where a small city or small town were the more frequent answers. So the larger side, but sticking with the town identity, but on the larger scale is how people are thinking about it today. And that's not that much different for what people would like to see Milford be 15 years from now. So continuation with medium-sized town and large town as the preferred answers. And again, compares to back almost a little more than 20 years ago, people were preferring a small town or small city, but not as much on focus on city these days. So how close is Milford today to your ideal vision? The most frequent answer was not close, but we see a fair amount also in that neutral category, so the middle ground, and then also decent amount of answers in the close and then also even the less good category of really not close. A very small percentage of responses in the very close category. So I think this shows the importance of a process like this to kind of identify and articulate that North Star for the town and then move toward that vision strategically over the coming years, and really help people to feel better that the ideal version of the town of Milford is something that's being moved toward. So we had a few also open-ended responses and identified and analyzed those open-ended responses, and these were the themes that emerged from those open-ended responses. So what words would you use to describe Milford today? A lot of answers around overcrowded or overpopulated or growing too fast. Those are the types of sentiments that show up in that top theme. Considerations around a shifting identity or transformation, and sort of both nervousness and excitement around that transformation or shifting identity. Some people were more positive about it, some people were more concerned about it. And then socioeconomic challenges in a variety of ways, sort of the need for stable jobs, the need for more affordable housing, the need for more English second language learner programs and things like that. So I think those were overarching themes, but a lot of detail in those responses as well. And then also an open-ended response around describing your vision for the future. And the top themes there were to strengthen community development and identity in the town with a focus on downtown, address traffic and congestion, which is easier said than done, but I think we need to be strategic about ways that the town can actually achieve progress in that area. Highlight importance of education in schools, strengthening community cohesion and community safety, and then managing sustainable economic development. Those were all recurring themes. Again, a lot of great detail, and appreciate the time and thought people put into those responses. But if we sort of collate and analyze those responses, these are recurring themes that occurred across them. And then asking what is the legacy people hope to leave in Milford. And I think that's an important question as we think about these next 10 years and how to improve the town in this planning process. Strengthening community and inclusion was an important theme and idea, the sense of increasing the sense of welcome in the community and the sense of belonging. Focusing on education in the schools, which has been a priority in the town, but continuing that. Addressing safety and family-friendly environment, both sort of in each of the areas of the town, open spaces, also downtown, making sure that the family orientation of the town is a priority. Strengthening economic development in small businesses. There's a wealth of small businesses in the downtown and around the town, and supporting those entrepreneurs in the community. And then lastly, thinking about the great legacy the town is building on and preserving, and sort of recognizing that legacy through historic preservation and other means, and also building on that sense of community pride as we move toward the next era. So we had, the survey, of course, wasn't the only engagement opportunity, and as I mentioned, we are putting these responses together with others. We had the Community Vision Forum in May. We had a Community Organization Day in June. We had a small business owner meeting, which was important because our engagement so far has been, I would say, more skewed towards the English-speaking whiter population of the town, and the small business owner meeting was a predominantly small business owners of color and non-English speaking population. So I think that was an important meeting for us to understand the concerns from that audience. And then also attended events hosted by others in the town and made sure that we were present in other occasions and opportunities, which we will continue to do. And as we shift towards talking about the fall engagement later, we'll talk about ways that we hope to continue both inviting the audiences which have been a part of the process so far, but also expanding again to hopefully set up opportunities where we get more of the non-white, non-English speaking populations of the town involved in this process, which I would say has been so far we have tried but have been less successful in getting those voices represented in this feedback. So I'll pause there. I know that was a lot and I went through it pretty quickly, but just see if there's any reflections or thoughts about community engagement in general or the community survey specifically.
The only thing I had, and I'm sure you're aware of it as you go through it, is there's so many competing things with statements that people have made and wanted that it'll be interesting as to how you go through that. I mean, you look at, you're talking about housing, we've got, and talking about cost of housing, and in the next slide, we're talking about overcrowding. Well, to alleviate overcrowding and to think that we're going to reduce housing are two divergent goals that I'm not sure what the answer is or not, but there are a lot of those as you go through there that are going to make it very difficult as you move forward as to what the actual plan is. But I mean, obviously that's part of the process.
Appreciate that.
Question for you. As we think about where we are so far, we had 600 even responses. I think you have over 30,000 people in town. Is that a representative sample? You've done this lots of different times. Is that a normal sample size? Is just how do you reflect on that?
Yeah, I would say in general in planning processes, we don't ever get to a representative sample, I would say. It's not scientific in that way as a like a political or political poll would be, as they try to do more scientific sampling of population. I would say we have work to do in terms of still building up the numbers of our engagement. I think compared to we're doing well compared to the 2003 plan. I think we have higher numbers overall. But I think for a town this size, we would hope that we could continue to build those numbers up through the remainder of this process. And would hope that, I mean, my target has been that hoping as we continue to get that number up over 1,000 for sure, of individuals engaged. I think we have, as I've mentioned, our work to do in engaging the more underrepresented populations of the town, and I think that has been a challenge and will be a focus of our work as we shift towards engaging in the fall. And you'll see that show up in the way we're thinking about the fall engagement as well. I think as much as possible, while we're not a scientific sample, we are trying to be very deliberate about those different parts of the population. And right now, I would say we're, like, the survey responses are well representative of an older, whiter, more well-to-do homeowner population, I would say, is what most people self-identified in terms of the survey demographics. So I would say the target would be for us to diversify beyond that demographic in the coming.
When other towns that you've done this with, when you've had the same challenge, it's like, how do you handle that one?
Yeah, it's. I think in this case, it's hosting meetings outside of town hall in places where non-English speaking populations specifically will be potentially more comfortable attending a meeting with us, and hopefully communicating to that population how this process is relevant to them and their lives, and why it could matter, which is, I think, a challenge, but that's something that we'll be taking on. I think some of the channels which we've already been leaning on, like the schools and communicating through school engagement, we'll be doing again in the fall. I think that's a very effective way to meet a diverse cross-section of the community through the school outreach and piggybacking on that. And I think also the water department, water bills, like that's another way to really get a broad cross-section of the community. So we're doing a lot of the tricks that we have tried in other communities. And I think in general, our community engagement team, which you've all met in previous meetings with Javier and Sasha and Naji, they are very focused on relationship building, which I think they have been putting in the effort to do. And I'm hopeful that that relationship building will sort of pay dividends now as the process continues in getting sort of that network of community-based organizations and others to sort of build the reach of our asks and trying to get people involved. Okay. Well, the process will continue, of course. We'll talk a little bit more specifically about the fall. We will also be having additional community surveys. So as the draft goals come into focus, community surveying will be another of the tools that we use to try to expand that reach. Not everyone, of course, can attend a meeting with us, and that's shows up in the feedback as well. So the community survey was reflected back to us as one of the effective ways that people can engage with this process on their own time and give us feedback. So we'll be leveraging that tool again as we continue. All right, so shifting over to the draft vision statement, and thank you all for taking the time in your last meeting when you were not present to talk about the vision statement and share with us back the preference for the format and sort of arrangement and content of the 2003 vision statement as still being sort of the preferred approach and relevant. The vision statement, just thinking about the plan itself and its content, is an important core of what we're thinking about here. So it is, in a lot of ways, a central point that the other topics will relate to and build off of. That central vision statement is then, through the goals and strategies, made more detailed and actionable. But it's important to start with this central feature of the vision statement. So we are taking all of the various conversations and feedbacks, including the community survey we just went through, and those results to plug into crafting this updated vision statement. These are some of the very specific visioning exercises we did at the community forum in May. You can see, just to recap some of those ideas, again, the importance of the downtown, the importance of inclusivity and being a welcoming community, the importance of restaurants and affordability and sidewalks and keeping the fiscal responsibility of the town in line with property taxes, et cetera. And then some of the things to achieve, which point more towards the goals and strategies. But you can see these are information that we'll be referring back to and continuing to mine as we develop the content. And then this was another way that we approached that question about what kind of change is important in Milford. And most people were gravitating towards the notion of steady incremental change, maybe a few transformative major changes or some smaller changes, but continuing on a steady arc of evolution and improvement. So the vision statement is, as it was in the 2003 comprehensive plan, a statement of shared values. It is an overarching description of where the community's headed over this 10-year time frame of the plan, and then gets to highlight some specific areas, but really is providing the overarching lens through which the goals will then make more detailed. So the previous comprehensive plan vision statement was a series of 4 paragraphs. We've tried to keep that format while injecting some new language based upon the community feedback that we've been hearing. You can see in this first topic, so on the left is the previous vision statement from 2003. On the right is the current draft vision statement. And again, just to state as a reminder, this is what I would frame as the initial draft version of a vision statement. This vision statement will be a work in progress for the continuation of this comprehensive plan process until we hit pencils up in about March of 2025. And so we will continue to gather feedback on this. This will be a subject of our engagement in the fall, and invite your thoughts about it as well. But this is, I think, a good starting point to shift us away from the 2003 vision statement, building on it, but giving us something new to start with, and then we'll be making it better over the coming months for sure. So in this first paragraph, the topics covered were a connection to the legacy of Milford and its roots, and then some language around economic development, being a business-friendly community, and its assets of location and transportation. So if you'll forgive me, I think the best way to do this, since we've spent a lot of time trying to craft specific words in this language, I'll just go ahead and read this paragraph just so you can get a feel for how the proposed draft vision statement starts to feel and sound. So it goes, Milford of the 21st century honors its historic roots while embracing a dynamic and inclusive future. The town supports a vibrant and welcoming resident and business community that builds connections between residents of all backgrounds and strengthens community identity and cohesion. The town's strategic location and robust transportation network position it as a hub for new industries and business, driving managed and sustainable economic growth and innovation. The town continues to improve transportation infrastructure to manage traffic, reduce congestion, and improve travel conditions in support of a vibrant local economy. So you can see how hopefully you see both building on that 2003 vision statement and kind of holding true to all, some aspects of it, while not, building continuity from the vision for the town at that point in time. But also, I think some of the themes that we've just gone through in terms of community survey and community feedback are showing up squarely here, at least to us. So keep going, unless anyone has anything about that first paragraph. The second paragraph, again, we do the same thing, or shifting from that foundation 2003 to current. The topics in this paragraph are being a diverse and welcoming community, attracting residents and visitors, and the importance of the downtown. So I'll continue reading this second paragraph. Milford continues to attract a diverse population by fostering a welcoming environment for families of all backgrounds, and providing a range of housing options for different life stages. The town's commitment to inclusivity is reflected in supportive community services and housing policies that help meet the needs of all residents. Local shopping, entertainment, and services also attract residents and visitors to Milford. In particular, the downtown is a central feature of the community, offering a pedestrian-friendly environment which brings the community together with a variety of local shops, restaurants, parks, cultural venues, and events. Hitting each of those topics, and you can see also how this language would very clearly connect to more specific goals in some of the topics. So we're giving ourselves some of those nested ideas which will be built upon in the various topics of the plan. The third paragraph continues to expand on the topic of inclusive housing for a wide range of needs. And so that paragraph, again, building off of the previous third paragraph, reads now as, because Milford has adopted a strategy of inclusion, the town supports housing opportunities suitable for meeting a wide range of needs. A diverse resident population is drawn together, fostering a sense of shared community pride and identity. All households, from longtime residents to newcomers, share in a sense of community through enriching events, programs, and services. Civic engagement and community pride are enhanced through a strong emphasis on education and Milford schools. The town prioritizes public safety and welfare for all residents by enforcing regulations related to high quality and healthy housing opportunities. So again, I think a lot of those themes that we saw in the survey are starting to show up here squarely in this language. And then the final paragraph of that four-paragraph composition is focusing on the importance of reinvention and redevelopment, the natural resources and parks, community, and then strong services and infrastructure to round it out. This final paragraph reads, Milford encourages the continued transformation of high-tech industries, healthcare, and small businesses to support sustainable redevelopment and economic investments. The town continues to prioritize its unique position at the headwaters of the Charles River with a focus on preserving natural resources and protecting water sources. The core of the community has been transformed through a system of interconnected, natural, park-like settings that remain the pride not only of residents, but of the business community that helped to build and maintain them. Pride in the community is strengthened through accessible parks, responsive social services, excellent municipal management, and well-maintained infrastructure. Milford has managed its growth and evolution in a manner that has allowed it to remain a community where residents share a sense of shared values and common purpose. So I think it also, what we're trying to do in this vision statement is strike a balance between the sort of idealistic vision where we're reaching to a little bit more ambition, but also keep it grounded and pragmatic. We don't want it to be something that's not achievable, but we also don't want it to be something that's already been achieved. So I think we're trying to strike that balance between ambition and practicality. Thoughts about this first initial working draft of a vision statement?
The only thing, the walking trail that we built and continue to maintain and expand, and its connection with the other towns and where it's connected with Holliston, it's connected with Hopkinton. I think that's part of, should be somewhat part of it, because that's a vision they have, and they want to continue it too.
Yeah, that's great. And maybe highlighting the connection to surrounding towns and that, regional nature of that connection. That's great. Other thoughts?
I guess more of an opinion question. There's 4 paragraphs cover a lot of subjects, right? I mean, deliberately, right? As I think about your experience doing this, against sort of what you went through from the results right before this, right? There's some major themes that jump out, is like in the feedback that we've gotten, and of course, like every one of those things is sort of at least addressed because there's 4 robust paragraphs. But is there need in this to have more focus on the key things that people are talking about, or is it like, no, you really don't need to do that? I've never done one of these before.
Yeah, I think that that focus can come in a few ways. That there are a variety of vision statement formats for this type of plan. I think some of them, you see versions that are more bulleted in nature sometimes. This one's more narrative. I think the narrative approach is fine, but it does potentially make, hitting you on the head with those important themes. They're nested in the narrative a little bit more. So I think we can, as we continue in this process, those themes will be very evident in the goals as well. I think as we start to see how all this content comes together, there's also the opportunity to introduce like literally a section on themes, like overarching themes that we could not necessarily, that are nested in the vision statement, but that we can also pull out and highlight that then would show up again in the goals. So I think that would be potentially another layer of information that we could add to this that might be useful. And it's particularly if what we start to see, and I think we see it a little, the outlines of this and the feedback so far is there might be 3 or 4 really important topics that, of course, there will be other topics that are covered in the plan, but we see traffic and congestion, we see housing affordability, we see the importance of fiscal responsibility and sort of a prudent approach to the town's assets. Those are recurring in a lot of the feedback we're seeing. And so those might be ideas that are present in the vision statement and then again pulled out, highlighted in some other way.
Yeah, I think the level of detail you're looking for is going to be addressed in each element of the plan. But the vision statement is just that. It's an umbrella for the entire plan. And as you go through each element as they get to it, if it doesn't just come out and say how it's connected to the vision, it'll be obvious. So I think the information and the specificity you may be looking for is still going to be there, but the vision statement isn't normally where you would do that kind of thing. So I don't know if that helps any.
Yeah, it's obviously style, and that's why I'm just hoping to talk about it like this, so I appreciate the conversation. I was kind of thinking about, what I thought was interesting in the survey results, and then we went through the survey results, and then there was, we ended with describe your vision for the future and describe the legacy. And themes came in that weren't in the other questions. Like education, one that popped on those two right away. It wasn't in the other responses the same way. And like, oh, okay, so that triggered something for the 600 people who participated. So then I would look for like education. Hey, that was top 2 on those. And it's like, oh, yeah, there's, in the third paragraph at the bottom says strong education. Okay, it's there. But hey, when you talk about legacy, people all of a sudden jumped on that, right? So that's kind of what I was trying to figure out, like what do people value and how does that get into this? And I understand your point. You're saying, hey, look, this should be broad, and then, or one style would be this would be broad, and then the follow-up would be these are the priorities, behind that. That's fine. I just want to talk about it before the moment's passed.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I do think as our process continues and the content of the plan through those goals and strategies begins to be defined, we will be doing some prioritization, like literally asking the community to help us prioritize, because there will be too much to accomplish in a lot of ways. So I think that type of prioritization will help us elevate sort of what reassess continually what really is truly important to the community, and then elevate that. I also feel like as we get to that level of detail and prioritization in this process, then we should also be revisiting the vision statement. So if something like the schools emerges as like the clear priority, and I think that we need to make sure that comes through clearly in the vision statement, or whatever the case may be. And that will happen also with the goals. So as goals begin to be developed for each topic, if there's not sort of a clear sentence to nest a goal in the vision statement, then we'll think about ways that the vision statement could be expanded or amended so that there's not a goal which isn't under that umbrella of the vision statement. So what I'm hearing maybe is a reasonable starting, like we're a reasonable start. We're not, we haven't totally missed the mark, but we've got a good foundation to build on.
It's good. Most of the ingredients in it.
Yeah, it's not, it wasn't something that you're gonna be sitting there and say, like, how long is this gonna be? So it's short and it's sweet.
Great. Well, as I suggested, this will be a focus of the fall engagement. We'll be kind of testing this, sending it out, doing some workshopping in the various meetings and formats that we have over the course of the fall, and we'll make, with each of those responses, be making this statement better and building upon the community feedback. All right, so now we have our focus topic discussion for the day, which Courtney's going to help walk us through. And that's on land use.
Good evening, everyone. Courtney Lewis again. Happy to be here this evening to talk about land use in the town. Milford's physical characteristics have influenced how the town's built form has taken shape and evolved over time, starting as a farming and milling community along the banks of the Charles River, and then transforming into a thriving mining and manufacturing town. Based on the town's land uses, development patterns, population trends, we at MAPC would classify Milford as a sub-regional urban center. These communities are often characterized as having small to mid-sized urban downtowns surrounded by residential neighborhoods with a mix of housing options. New growth typically takes the form of redevelopment of existing sites in and around the downtown, as well as industrial areas and along the periphery of the community. This existing land use map shows the spatial distribution of existing uses throughout the town. Lower density residential neighborhoods, which are in the light yellow, dominate most of the town. The downtown business district and major commercial corridors are in red, and they follow major thoroughfares throughout town, including the I-495 corridor. That also overlaps with industrial areas in the town, which are in purple, which are generally clustered in that same area around the 495 corridor. The town also has a large number of public lands, which are the blue parcels that are shown. And part of that, part of the exempt or public land category includes Milford's parks and open spaces. To the left is a breakdown of the use categories, with residential uses being the primary use in the town. The next few maps kind of show the evolution of Milford through its development patterns and how it's evolved over time. So in this first map, the first era of buildings shows that the town experienced rapid growth in the downtown business district prior to 1920. As you can see, the majority of development is clustered around Main Street, which is the town's traditional downtown core. This next slide just emphasize how the town starts to grow outward. And then in the 1940s to 1960s, the town experiences a substantial growth both in population and in development, and part of that is attributed to the construction of 495. And this slide and the next slide kind of show development in the town close to when the previous comprehensive plan was done. This also shows how subdivisions are starting to be formed in the northern and western portions of town, as well as the larger, more big box developments over to the east near 495. And this just further emphasizes that even that the town has experienced growth in both in population but also development since 2000. Can you go back one slide? And now forward. Just noting that most of the development that's happening in the 2010 to 2022 time span is more infill development, so it's taking advantage of sites that are already existing and kind of filling in some of the gaps. Understanding the distribution of land helps to better understand the zoning and how the zoning should guide future land uses. Article 2 of the town zoning bylaw establishes 12 base zoning districts, 5 of which are residential districts, 4 that are commercial, and 3 industrial zones. That's represented in the different colors here. The residential districts are in yellow, the commercial districts are in red, and then the industrial districts are in the shades of purple, with the residential RB and RC zoning districts accounting for most of the town. The town also has 2 floodplain districts, which are a floodplain district and a water protection or water resource protection district, and both of those are overlays. This image shows the overlap of residential uses compared to the residential zoning districts, where the darker shade and the shades of yellow overlap are the areas where residential uses are actually in a residential zoning district. And again, residential uses account for 56% of the town's land. The town has one district that in some ways allows mixed uses, but that accounts for a very, very small portion of land, area of town, and most of those mixed uses are in the OR zoning district. Commercial, this image shows the commercial areas, and again, the areas where the red and black overlap are areas where commercial uses are within those zoning districts, and then within each of the districts, the town also regulates the form and size of buildings, so height, lot coverage, and even the amount of open space, as well as required parking for each specific use. Industrial areas, again, account for approximately 10% of the town's land, and most of those are clustered around the 495 corridor, and they are generally a series of larger parcels in town, based on the spatial requirements specified in the zoning. So some things that I found in terms of challenges and opportunities while looking at the town zoning were opportunities to update the zoning bylaw. Typically, communities, I would consider this a best practice. Typically, communities, after they've done a comprehensive planning process, will follow it up with with changes to their zoning ordinance, bylaws, or code, and that is very intentional to align the vision that is stated in the comprehensive plan with the zoning, and making sure that those two things line up. Another thought was an update to zoning districts and uses. So a number of the existing zoning districts lack a purpose and intent statement. This helps or characterize different areas throughout town. It also signals to developers the type of development that's appropriate in a district. There are opportunities to provide a greater range of housing options, both market rate and affordable housing. You've seen from some of the survey comments that housing affordability is very important to residents. And also allowing for, and noting in the housing, the town's existing zoning is very restrictive by allowing only single-family dwelling. Two-family units are allowed, but only by special permit and only in specific zoning districts. And also allowing mixed-use development and ensuring that there's a zoning district that supports that, especially with a focus on bringing additional business and traffic to the downtown. I think that's going to be a key element to seeing those things come to pass. So a few things that I'd like to open us up with in terms of discussion. Can the bylaw be updated to support a wider range of affordable housing options and opportunities, especially in areas where it's appropriate? So this would be mixed-use development along commercial corridors, for instance, near the downtown, but also in larger commercial areas like the big box stores that are along 495, thinking about development and redevelopment of particular sites that would be similar to developments like Assembly Square, but also allowing for there to be more of a presence, a 24-hour presence in the downtown by allowing for housing as well as small-scale commercial uses in the downtown. And then just noting if there are opportunities for things like accessory dwelling units or live-work units, which are currently not part of the existing bylaw, and also just updating districts and uses, like I said, to ensure that the zoning is keeping up with evolving trends in development.
Thank you, Courtney. Any reactions or thoughts?
As far as the zoning, we've been keeping up with the zoning. We've been changing our zoning around the hospital. We changed it to an OR for hospital-type, medical-type buildings with the residential area still kept intact there. One thing we did do was we changed some of the areas to business park, which was a good idea at the time, but right now with 2020, after 2020 and everyone working from home, the business park, they're not going to be developed. So that's something we could probably look into again to do something about that. But Larry's been very good about changing, what's the zoning around downtown, Larry, in Congress Street, what was that? That was OR too, right?
OR, yep.
Yeah, that was also part of OR. Again, some of the houses, the big houses that were built, to me, you know, they can be used for offices or, you know, again, doctor's offices, insurance companies, anything. So we change it, and we've been changing, we change our zoning bylaws quite a bit. The last town meeting, we brought like 5 changes to the,
And I think that's great, and it shows that the town is constantly progressing. What I was noting was like a comprehensive review, because as you do things in like piecemeal over time, you want to ensure that those zoning regulations are complementary of one another, and not in conflict, which sometimes you don't realize or don't know until you look at the bigger picture as opposed to a specific district or area.
Well, I think in fairness to the board, we've been following the 2003 comprehensive plan. The majority of the zoning amendments have been initiated by this board. And between this board and the staff, we are doing what you suggest should be done. We've always done that. We don't just go out blindly and say, oh, we want to take that block and rezone it. It's always been in the context of the overall comprehensive plan in terms of trying to justify, A, whether it needs changing or not in the first place, and B, what it would change to. So it's a little bit of a mischaracterization to make it sound like the board does it blindly, because they have not done it for 20-some years blindly. They have always followed the comprehensive plan.
That's not at all what I meant in that statement. What I was saying is, just like you noted, that changes have been made to the zoning to align with what's specified and recommended in the 2003 plan. The town should continue to do that. That was not to say that the board has been ineffective in making change within the town. So I apologize if that came off that way, but that's not what I intended.
I guess I have, I'm somewhat torn in the, call it the mixed-use development or whatever. I mean, the issue that this town has faced, you know, we talk about affordable housing, and you want to do more units. And then we talk about the tax rate. And unfortunately, those two are intertwined to the extent that the more units we get, the higher the tax rate needs to be, because as we put more students into our school system, we end up with a higher and higher bill that doesn't come out. I mean, that's one of the reasons why, as we go back through the 70s, and the reason why the town didn't allow for multifamily development is because we were inundated with apartments at one point in time, and the school systems got overwhelmed. That changed the zoning. And we're talking about the same thing now, of allowing this in other places, and I'm not sure that that's a economically sane thing to do. Certainly, we've looked at, and I'll be the first one to admit it, this board has been very active in trying to do a mixed-use development in the downtown area, because I believe that would help. And I don't think the downtown is in that bad a shape. I mean, I see this come up all the time, and they want to increase the downtown and things like that. And I drive through downtown, and I've driven through downtown for 68 years of my life. And at this point in time, it's really not that bad. Would a mixed use where there were more families in the downtown 24/7 be something that gives it a little bit of a boost? I think so. So I could see doing that, doing a mixed use in areas that are giving us tax dollars now as we look at the industrial areas and stuff, and saying I want to now put in a money loser for the town, to me is going to be a tough road to hoe. So I don't know that I could be supporting those things, because as much as people talk about affordable housing, I think we lose it when you say, yeah, the house might be a little bit cheaper, but your taxes are going to go way up when all those kids get into the school system.
Just to give an example, I just read a little while ago, for the town of Milford, it's a little over $17,000 to educate one kid. Average tax is what, $6,000? Talking almost 3 times.
You have a valid point. I will also say, like, the risk of not having zoning that speaks to development that's happening anyway, like a 40B, puts the town at a disadvantage, because at least with the zoning in place, it provides greater protection or greater oversight in terms of what is developed and how it's developed. You have things like FAR and your existing regulations, which is good for, is a good tool in terms of density, but it doesn't necessarily speak to form or, form or style or design.
Just like also, too, one of the concerns, the main concerns I heard see it, like there was first and second. Most of the time it was first was traffic. You increase these 40Bs, you're talking two cars per house. I mean, we only have so many streets, and they were built in so many years ago. We can't increase the streets anymore. We can't have another access road or anything else. It's just, we tried that in the 80s. And if you guys remember the study that was done in the 80s for a bypass road, just didn't work. We never had it done. So to say, we need to increase more 40Bs or whatever, and where we're going to put them, we turned down a casino that was going to give us close to $30 million a year, and one of the reasons was because of traffic. You know what I mean? So these are the things that we have to consider too.
And right now, we have 340B site approval requests in. And guess where they're at? All in business and industrial zones. So, 40B ruins the towns. And it doesn't matter how good your zoning is, if some twit decides he wants to overdevelop his site, all he's got to do is get a site approval and develop a 40B. And it just blows the zoning out. So we've got
and bypass a lot of zoning rules. There you go.
So Deer Street, which is still in the business park zone, has 2 40Bs. One's done, the other's going to start, and the third one's online. It just came in for site approval, and that's going to totally wipe out the remainder of the Deer Street Business Park. There's a 40B coming in for site approval at the corner of Beaver and 109. There's a 40B that's coming in for site approval on the overflow car lot of the former Toyota dealership on Fortune Boulevard. All great sites to have neighborhoods, right? So they're blowing out industrial zones, commercial zones, where the tax rate, we have a higher tax rate because of the dual system. So we lose all that. We lose the ability to create the jobs that would have been there. And now we're going to get all this housing that's going to jack up the cost of schools. The town subsidizes over $9 grand a year for each one of those new kids that comes in from a 40B. So, it almost doesn't matter that we do planning and zoning that makes sense anymore. And if 40B wasn't bad enough, now the state's forcing auxiliary housing units, 2-family zones. There's no single-family zoning in the state anymore. The entire state's a 2-family zone as the basic foundation. So if the state's so worried about losing people moving out of state, that's not a wise move, because all the people that own single-family homes that had relied on the, quote, presumed protection that they had under their local zoning, that's all gone. So now you're going to see even more people leaving because they have no more protection for a single-family house. So,
Growth can't be contained or restricted, but it can be managed. And by having effective zoning in place, you can direct that growth to appropriate locations. And And by building additional housing units in appropriate areas, you increase your SHI and you eliminate the risk of a 40B.
Well, we're gonna be at that point. I mean, I think you gotta look at where we are. I mean, the only thing that you have in the town of Milford is redevelopment. There is no large tracts of land that are available for residential development. So what you've got is you've got people coming in with 40Bs, taking the industrial areas in town in, for lack of a better word, bastardizing those in terms of putting residential in those areas. You know, if we want to look at it long-term, you know, if these finally get, unfortunately, we're, again, because of the way the state does this, we're gonna, if all these get built, Milford's gonna be well over 15% affordable housing units.
Yeah, we're at 9 now.
Yeah, we're at 9, but everybody gets to throw them all in now because we're at, you know, we're at that point. So, you know, I think we have to look at what we can do or not do. So you know, I think it's going to be tough to you know, to get those, you know, if we're putting this in the plan, I think it's going to be a tough sell in certain areas. You know, I'm certainly willing to see how we move forward and what those things are. I'm just telling you, I think it's going to be a tough sell.
We went out and we zoned it so we have a good residential area, we have a good industrial base to pay for it. Now, they take the industrial base away from us, and they put residential in, so we lose the money coming in, and it costs us more because they built them.
There are also mixed-use industrial sites, like, it depends on the type of industry as well, which can be modified through zone and expressed through zoning.
Question, Courtney, can't see. I think what would be helpful, because I think all these points kind of speak to the tension of development, right? And you make the point that it's happening anyway. I mean, it's effectively happening even, you know, we can't stop it. But there's something you said about, I think that we probably need more help understanding around the economics of creating higher density housing, and just because the tax rate as a function of how this, you know, it affects the schools is very legitimate. I mean, there's you know, individual house does not pay for itself in town by itself, and you know, people are right, you know, as the finance committee rep, people are right to say, hey, like a two-family house or a multi-family house on its own right doesn't pay for itself, and it just makes the problem worse. But that's as is now. So like what I'm listening for is, as this develops, is, well, what's the multi-pronged approach to make this a viable thing for us that still makes it attractive for the town, makes it affordable for people, and it's a viable option against the 40B that's just happening in places we don't have. And if it's impossible, it's impossible, but it's got to be like, it has to, the stool has to have all the legs to it, right? And so far we've talked about like maybe one of the legs of the stool, and it's obviously tipping over in the conversation.
The state kills it anyway. We had 240Bs, and the state allowed them to sell it out, and pay the mortgage, and not make them 40Bs anymore.
Right.
So what's the sense? The state, no matter what you do, the state goes out and makes another law, probably to help Boston mostly, and
It's South Bowling Green.
throws us all under the table, under the tire. It's, again, the same thing with this past law with the auxiliary units. I mean, we allow them under special permit, and we're very good about giving the special permits out for it. But now, it doesn't matter. Everybody just build another auxiliary unit.
Takes all the fun out of the way from the zoning board of appeals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think we will hear more about it in our housing discussion too, which I think is the next deep dive conversation of the group is housing. But I do think coming up with within the comprehensive plan, a viable approach for the town to have more control over 40Bs, and keep, once you get to that threshold, keeping you there, and thinking about the financial viability from the town's service perspective of housing units. I think those are things we need to really dive into in this process. I think the other thing, which is a bit of a mystery, but that we need to explore and try to figure out some answers on, is the relationship between land use patterns and transportation and congestion. And I think that right now, the land use patterns that will continue without intervention, like the land use patterns that Milford has, will just continue in their current approach. And I think that approach has been producing more congestion with each subsequent era of growth and not less. And that pattern is likely to continue. So I think that, I mean, it's not an easy problem to solve, but we need to figure out, try to get at unwinding that pattern a little bit, that with growth equals more congestion. We need to think about the growth patterns which will not equal more congestion. And we don't have the right answer for that just yet, but I think we have some areas to explore. And I think mixed use is one of those areas to explore. And I know, and not just necessarily mixed use in the downtown core, but mixed use as effectively a way to get people out of their cars, to get them to be walking or biking more, and in a development pattern in parts of the town, not everywhere in the town, but in parts of the town where not every trip is a car trip. And I think right now, we've seen, and it's not just Milford, but seen throughout the region, development patterns where, for most residents, every trip has to be a car trip, and that's what is creating. I mean, it's not just transportation and land use are very closely connected, and it's very hard to fix transportation without addressing it.
Do you have any easy examples of towns that have navigated that type of problem as we think our way around the communities of Massachusetts? Like, hey, who over the last couple of decades has done a good job with that? And if you don't ready for an answer now, that's fine, but I'm
Marlboro.
interested in that.
Marlboro did a great job. They had the area, they built a bypass around the downtown, and it works fine. But they had the area and they could do it.
We don't have it.
You can't do it here.
Do it.
We don't have it.
That was still trips though. That's still mostly vehicular. You're talking about go downstairs to go to work or go next door to go to work. I can understand that. Like I said, I certainly will be interested in seeing what it looks like, but at the end of the day, and this becomes a tough situation, but you know, as we talked about with school and dollars and things like that, the bigger the town gets, the worse we are in terms of what we're able to control for tax dollars. And so we've got competing interests in there, so that, yeah, okay, you might improve the traffic, but taxes have to go up if we're going to be supporting additional housing. So it's going to have to me, it's going to have to be something that provides additional housing in a mechanism that's affordable. And I'm not sure that that's out there, but I'm certainly willing to listen.
Affordable for the town, you mean? For the town?
Affordable for the town. Well,
Everybody.
because at the end of the day, that's affordable for the people. I
Yeah,
mean,
it's good
if
for
we're
everybody.
going to be raising taxes in order to lower housing by some level, that doesn't get anybody anywhere.
No, nowhere at all.
I mean, the taxes keep going up at the end of the day. If you're going to have higher taxes and you're paying that for the next 20 years, what's saving $30,000 in a house get
No,
you?
another study was not either.
So, that's what I'm sort of looking at.
And Brent and his guys, they pinch as much as they can. And if it gets bigger, they're gonna pinch harder. And it's,
We've tried to direct growth as best we can in terms of, doing advantages to developments for senior housing and things like that, but it only got us so far with certain things. So that's why it'll be interesting to see, because we've tried to direct housing as best we can away from school-age kids coming into the system, just because we know that that's a money loser. So we've relied on the industrial commercial base, and now we're losing that to the state that feels this is a better way, and yet nobody in the state's willing to give us more money for education when we do it, when we get stuck with it.
Yeah, let me move back to Dubuque.
I'm with you.
Yeah, it's interesting, just bringing in some of the economic development data that's in your existing conditions brief too, where you have very strong, very low industrial vacancies, almost 0%, I think it was, and then the commercial vacancies, of course, with the patterns which commercial is dealing with everywhere post-pandemic, where the vacancies, I think, were in the 20% plus range. And so how does that land use evolve in the future to become more productive?
Yeah, that's, obviously, I think we've said that since the beginning, that that's to me is key as to how does that develop and how does that become higher, better usage. That's where we'd like to go. Obviously, if we were looking at mixed use, there needs to be a way to regulate that to some level. I mean, I think of those areas and I think about what developers would want to come in with the amount of units that are for that area of space, and it scares me.
I'll also just offer this. You have to think about the town's origins. It kind of evolved and grew around industry, and there was housing to support the folks who were doing that work.
Oh yeah, but I think there's plenty of that now available, existing. I mean, as this becomes bigger, I'm more and more convinced it becomes, as many people indicated when they said, why did they come to Milford? Because it was more affordable. So this just becomes another area to be a bedroom community of Boston that are going to be driving in and out of the city, and it's a little more affordable. And that isn't necessarily where I want to be.
Yeah, I think that's an important point. And I think Milford has also shown up in people's consciousness and identity of the town and in the data as a regional center unto itself. And it's a job center, of course, that you've got a lot of inflow of commuters coming into the town, while you also have many residents commuting out of town for work. So I think there's a pretty strong inflow and outflow, which is also contributing to that congestion, because you're not capturing residents who are working and living in the town, but you're kind of each day making that shift of commuting population.
Yeah, I think the traffic data shows that. If you go back to that,
Again, we get the supermarkets that bring the people in from the local towns that don't have.
I mean, the hospital's the biggest generator. I mean, between the hospitals and the medical facilities associated with that, there's a lot of people coming in every day that are coming in. The cancer, Dana-Farber.
Also catching on to 495. They all go there. They all go through our Main Street and whatnot for that area.
Traffic is a byproduct of success, really.
And everyone has a car today. I remember when I was on the school committee, we only had a parking lot for teachers and staff. One of my years on there, we had to appropriate several $1 million to expand the parking lot because more students had cars. And that's why we had to do it. We didn't increase the staff. Is that practically every junior or senior had their own car. No one seems to walk anymore.
All right, so I'm gonna. This has been a great discussion. I think we in this process, to me, this discussion shows the value of this process. We have a lot to puzzle through, but we will continue puzzling. But I do want to shift, recognizing that we've already talked for a while, shift to just talking about the community engagement in the fall briefly. before we wrap up. And so the point of our work in the fall is to basically continue, hopefully continue building awareness with people who have not yet heard of this process and expand our reach. But we also will be gathering feedback specifically on that draft initial vision statement that we walked through this evening. We'll also begin to define, really building on the foundation of that existing conditions brief. You'll start to see initial ideas for goals. They're not necessarily the goals that will be ultimately settled on, but the initial ideas for goals. And those initial ideas will be what we start to circulate and get feedback from the community on. So our approach, instead of having a single forum in the fall, which might be the center point of this type of process, we're imagining that forum being sort of pulled apart or exploded in certain ways. So it'll actually be a series of meetings that occur, say, from maybe starting in the end of September-ish as a starting point, and maybe go all the way through to, say, Thanksgiving time or so. So a solid month and a half or 2-month period where we host a series of sessions that are hopefully bringing and inviting more people into this process. So one of them would purposefully be a non-English speaking session in person, not in town hall. We need to figure out what venue might be best for that. And it would be promoted, and we try to be reaching out and getting into those audiences as much as possible to have them join us to engage with us. We'll probably put that towards the back end of that window because that session will require a fair amount of outreach and legwork. But then have a companion session to that, which would be, in a lot of ways, reaching the same audience which joined us at the spring session in May. And that this time we would host that via Zoom. That would be a virtual session, and that would be a more English-focused session. And that's what we heard from the feedback. A lot of people preferred, actually, to meet virtually. It would allow more people to attend. So we'll do that as a pairing. But then the other big idea in terms of this breaking apart of the forum is to actually have a series of smaller group discussions where we have invited audiences and invited stakeholders that are focused on the topics of this plan. So we would try to brainstorm and think about those who are involved in transportation, both town staff, various advocacy groups or allied organizations, and bring them together to talk about transportation, how these goals might be shaping up. Do the same for housing, for land use, for cultural and historic resources, et cetera. So we would have a series of small group focused discussions around the topics themselves and the goals that are beginning to emerge. We'll likely try to do that towards the front of that window. So we'd front end with some smaller group discussions and then have those two bigger discussions, both the English and non-English speaking sessions. So with all that, we'll coordinate with Larry as this starts to take more shape, but just wanted to see specifically if there are dates or windows of dates that we should avoid that would be best from a community perspective that are either busy weeks or that there's this big thing happening and no one would ever come to another meeting. And we don't necessarily need to get that this evening from you unless you have thoughts initially, but be happy to we'll coordinate with Larry and get some ideas about just starting to target some dates for this approach.
Well, obviously, you got Columbus Day on October 14th,
Yeah.
but our special town meeting is very likely going to be on October 21st, the following Monday.
It will be. So you need to stay away
Okay.
from that whole week,
Yeah, who knows if we have.
in case it goes more than one day.
Great.
Yes.
One primary.
November 5th is the election, and then your primary prior to that,
But I
yeah.
mean, obviously you guys,
Yep.
I'm sure you're aware of that. Those would just be somewhat.
Yeah, so November the 5th for the election, the 11th for Veterans Day.
But I don't think we have, as far as the town overall, Ricky, I think that's probably all you got is the fall town meeting. I don't think there's anything else that I can think of. It's
No, not that I'm aware of right now.
So when were you guys thinking for another ad hoc meeting?
Yeah, the next ad hoc meeting we had penciled in September 17th. Not sure if
Yeah,
that's,
that
is that a
sounds
real
right.
date for you guys?
Yep. That would have been, that's a meeting night anyway, so. Yep. All right,
Great.
that works.
Yeah, that one you probably, I mean, if possible, probably should be, try to stick to the housing one in terms of not the other things that we just talked about,
Yeah.
just timing, because we'll have a regular meeting with regular scheduled things on that 17th to some extent.
Right.
It might be a little tougher, but certainly, the first hour of that meeting, we can.
We appreciate that. We'll have a tighter meeting for that one, but we did have a fair amount of updates to cover this evening.
Yeah, no, that's good.
Yeah, we'll find out what we have, and then we can, if it's a light one, we'll just bang that out first, and then.
Sure.
Right.
Sounds great. Potentially, is there an opportunity to promote this process again at the special town meeting? Have, do some sort of update or blurb about this process, just to help people stay informed about it?
Yeah, I did it at the
There's no
annual.
reports at the special, I don't think they did.
We can do it though, Ricky, we can ask, I believe.
Well,
We did it at the annual.
if there's something to mail out, I can mail it out with the packet. It doesn't have to be a warrant article to have a report mailed out with
No,
the
just a
packet.
report at the beginning of the
No,
meeting.
we can do it at the beginning of the meeting,
Yeah,
too,
like
if
I
it's
did at the
relatively
end.
short. I can tell you right now that being a town meeting member for 30-something years, we want to make sure that if we're going to do a report, it's a 5-10 minute report at the most at the beginning. That's about as much as
May-
anybody will stay.
Maybe
Yeah.
a 2 or a 3-minute
You can do
report.
it again, but I mean, to be,
There was too many arguments about it for the specials the last time.
Yeah, I'd be very reluctant, and I'd also want to see what a warrant looks like.
Yeah, that's true, too. We
Great.
have no idea what it's
12
going to
articles, okay, great. 42 articles,
be. Yeah.
I would
I
be
think
somewhat
now that
reluctant to
you've
do
got the
that.
Website up, your website up for the plan, and there's enough word out that you're covering a lot more than we were when we first started. So,
well, certainly we can have boards there as they walk in and things like that, if we need to, that can be done.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it might-
handouts,
yeah, but if there's a small report, I can make copies and mail it out with the agenda packet or with the warrant packet when the clerk mails it out again.
Yeah.
And then
Page
you
or
don't
two.
have to necessarily say anything at all at the meeting.
Sure.
And still have other things available, as you say, on boards and stuff, so.
Well, it'd be great timing, for example, to circulate the draft vision statement and invite feedback on it, maybe through a survey people could link to, something like that.
Good idea.
I think it's a great idea. I think that the only thing, if you connect it to the whole conversation, the demographic that you're chasing versus the demographic you have, I think the demographic you have is going to be highly aligned with who's the town meeting members, just my guess.
I think that's true. Good point. Okay. Yes, so we will continue on and getting that approach to fall engagement more detailed. We'll have plan to be back with you all on the 17th, and I think we'll have a little more detail, of course, to the fall approach at that time, which we can share, but then our focus will be on housing, which will be, in large part, a continuation of the discussion we were having this evening, so this will be great. Well, appreciate you all taking the time this evening.
thank you, well done, thank you.
Thank you.
Motion to adjourn.
Second that.
Moved and second to adjourn. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Rick,
Can I vote? No?
we off?
No, you don't need to. We're done.